Kia ora koutou. Hello everyone. Ko Sangya Toku Ingowa. My name is Sangya and I'm your host for Up AIC, the podcast where we share campus stories, celebrate student voices, and connect with all the inspiring lecturers, students, and professionals who help us build the community here at AIC. As the saying goes in Mari, mate kimi ka kite, mate kite ka moio, mate moio ka marama. Meaning, seek and you will find and you will know, and through knowing, you will understand. For our first episode, I'm thrilled to welcome one of our inspiring lecturers here at AIC. He is none other than Varun Bhardwaj. Welcome, Varun.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Really excited to have you, Varun. Thank you so much for making time for us.
Thank you. I'm very honored that you would consider me as a suitable candidate for this podcast, and I think it's a great initiative.
How do you feel being here today?
I feel honored. I feel highly privileged, and I'm really excited to talk about all the things that you might like to talk about, and hoping that all of you who are listening to this get something out of this for yourself.
So let's talk a little about your PhD. Did you always plan on doing a PhD in your life? Like, were you always very excited, I'm going to pursue a PhD when I grow up? Or did you just, did it just happen on the way?
That moment that I first went back to India after being here for, I believe it was about 5 or 6 years. And then when I went back and I saw that the pond that I grew up around was gone. The monkeys and the peacocks and the buffaloes and the sparrows, they were gone. And instead, there was now, when you went for your morning walk, there was cyanide smoke from the burning of the rubbish that happened every morning because the manual scavengers that were working in the rubbish, they needed to make space for the new rubbish that was coming. So they had no other way but to burn it. And when I saw all of this, something kind of triggered in my mind. And being helpless as a 15-year-old or a 14-year-old to do anything about it, all I could do was go inwardly and make some kind of a resolution to myself or promise to myself to say that I'm going to be a cause in the matter of setting this right. But it wasn't until many years later that the actual idea of the PhD could be conceived. But that formational experience was always kind of a driving force, guiding me and reminding me of why I am here, what is my purpose. So I guess then the PhD was kind of a natural evolution of that journey. After I had completed my master's, I was in India. I was trying to do composting toilets in India as a result of my master's thesis. That was kind of the findings of my master's thesis I was trying to implement. But the thesis was focused on sustainable consumption. And I realized when I was working in India that the people who I was dealing with, I was looking at these people like consumers. However, these consumers were already locked in to existing patterns and purchasing behaviors and lifestyles. So I needed to go beyond seeing them as consumers, and I realized at that point that these people who I'm seeing as consumers, they're actually producers, they're actually managers, but their potential in producing and managing has not been realized. So then I thought, okay, I've got to really look at production systems and distribution systems, and because I was working with composting toilets and food systems in my master's, I decided to take that same context forward for my PhD. So from 2012 all the way till 2017, I kept talking to all the professors that I could at University, Auckland, AUT, and Victoria, Canterbury, trying to get into the PhD. So there was a long process where I was preparing for the PhD but not able to officially enroll in the PhD. And that was a really testing time as well, because we had had our first child in 2013. I was a young father. I was working full time for a lot of those years, trying to pay the mortgage and so on. But that vision that I had as a 15-year-old boy, kept driving
the fire, right? The fire in you, in your stomach. Once it's there, it's really hard to turn it off until you make your way through the path that you're trying to get through and make yourself to the destination. So that's the biggest contribution that you could make to this whole problem that you spotted, actually. I mean, how you used to tell us, I remember in class, actually, you connected topics whenever people come up with different topics that actually matter to them, and then you try to bring us back into the track, like into the lane. Does this come from applied management again? Does this belong to the management universe? Because even for you, because your research is mostly about sustainability and you come from management, so somehow creating this balance should have been tough, right? So which is why all your lessons, the learnings that you've acquired during this years of learning and years of journey for your PhD, that is what defines your approach and techniques right now, and your way of guiding students and leading them towards the direction that they should be headed to without any distractions. So it defines very true, Varun. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And the distractions are good in a way if you have time to indulge in those areas of study. So when I had those 5 years, I was really lucky. I was blessed to have the support of my family to go and learn all of those different topics that I was experimenting with in the early years of my PhD. So I would spend, a few months reading about an area of research that I thought was really relevant to this bigger problem. And then at the end of those 2 months, I would realize that the universities are not accepting that as a viable topic. And that would be okay. And then I would move on, to the next area of study that was coming up for me as a result of having gone through that. So things like responsible leadership, responsible innovation, sustainability leadership, sustainability innovation, open innovation, radical innovation, all of these different areas, new market creation, bottom of the pyramid, all of these different literature domains, I dabbled in them, and I really kind of took so much liberty and so much joy in reading about what these scholars were doing. So now when I notice that students are going down a path that's going to waste a lot of their time, but it's not going to answer the research question that they're really interested in, I can spot that really quickly, and I can say,
oh, this takes me back to my assessments again. I mean, it kind of took me back to block 1, where I was like messed up. I mean, trying to put things together and trying to put all the pieces together, and how you're like, in 1 second, you can just do it like magic, right? I mean, you shared how once you've read so many articles, you can just scan and skim through it and then spot the questions, the holes there, the gaps there, and you're like so quick, you can read everything. I'm like, wow, amazing. This person is magic. I mean, there's so much for me to learn from you, and how you mentioned about the limited resources and how you just talk about your setbacks. So after all, this is exactly what keeps us pushing, right? Just to keep growing and not stop, and just keep doing what we are supposed to do and what we are actually trying to achieve. And every day you wake up and then you have this feeling, this thought in your mind that you cannot get over with until you get it done. So I think that's really what you're trying to express through your words and everything that you keep telling us every day. Like there has to be this motivating factor, this goal, this aim, this fire in yourself that only pushes you every day. So, which, I mean, really got stuck with me and other students as well in the class. So, which is why we are here today sharing this space. And it's really, really enlightening once again. So, talking about your research, can we dive a little deeper into your research? I mean, what was it about? And tell us a bit about it.
Absolutely. So when we finally came to a point in 2017 that all of the other doors had closed for me, I found myself in my backyard reading this article that was written by Shelley Spiller, and it was about wayfinding leadership. And the way that Shelley described the phenomena of leadership was so different to everything else that I had read up until that point. I was so inspired that I immediately wrote an email to Shelley and said, not just an email, but I prepared a whole intention for my research, and I submitted that intention to the University of Auckland PhD administrator at the business school. And I said, I would like to work with Shelley Spiller on this idea for a PhD, and the idea was based around food sovereignty and food security and this idea of leadership in this space at that time. And Shelley Spiller wrote back to me, and although she was going on a sabbatical, she felt that the research needed to go ahead immediately, and so she organized for a large panel of professors to come and meet with me, where I had the opportunity to present the idea to a bigger panel of professors at the University of Auckland. And I was very fortunate that 3 of those professors said yes to taking me on as their student. And one of those professors was Rachel Wolfgram, and she stayed with me till the very end of my PhD, whereas the other 2 professors moved on a little while later from the supervisory team, and I was able to recruit others, and some of those others also moved on as the topic evolved and changed and pivoted. So there was always this sense for me that I'm the one who's driving this research, and if the people who I'm bringing on the supervisory team are not interested in the same things that I'm really interested in, then I have to find people who are interested and people who are the world experts in those areas. So Rachel Wolfgram, her area of expertise is spiritual leadership, Maori leadership, indigenous knowledge, traditional ecological knowledge. So that's always been an important part of my research. So the other 2 supervisors that were with me at the end of the PhD journey, Dan Tish, who's very much interested in this idea of resilience in the dairying sector in New Zealand. So extreme weather events, climate change, climate science communication, and my other supervisor, Jamie Newith, who is very much interested in this idea of entrepreneurship and innovation for sustainability in not-for-profits and social enterprises and organizations that are doing things differently. So those were the people that I had around me to support my research. And in 2021, a paper was published in the journal Business and Society, which was called Cross-Scale Systemic Resilience. Before the publication of that paper, there was no theory that we could hang the PhD on. And when that paper got published, we finally had a theoretical framework that was published in an A-ranked journal that we could hang the PhD on. Because prior to that, it was always a question of what is your theory? What is the big idea?
Of course, that's the toughest part, right? I mean, we all struggle. We have this idea in our heads, like we want to really work towards it, but it's all about weaving the threads together. Nothing can be hanging along, like just all by itself. And you need someone else to support. And it's like, I remember some lecturer telling me something about like, this was not mentioned by me. This was told by someone else, so that you can always put the blame on someone else or just accredit who the idea initially initiated from. So yeah, it's basically, now it all makes sense. I mean, the whole picture makes sense to me because I was completely new to this field. I was completely new to research and how you planted this idea about everything that research requires, the everyday effort, the little details, the tiny questionnaires, the tiny references, the in-text citations and everything. Those felt like a huge, hideous task initially, but later all of that makes sense. And now I can see the whole picture about giving credits to the efforts that the people from the past have put into bringing up something as beautiful as this piece of paper, and with some titles and names.
Hey everyone, time to get festive! Something bright is happening at AIC. Join us on Monday, October 20 for 11:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. on Level 1 AIC for our Festival of Lights. Enjoy the colors, music, food, and cultural performances that make Diwali one of the biggest celebrations of the year. Bring your friends, share the joy, and be part of this vibrant AIC tradition.
Then that really contributes to one area of management or some field, right? So yeah, it's basically a structure that's woven by threads of ideas. So it cannot be just hanging around and just lingering on its own. So yeah, that brings me back about you talking how you could hang up your idea into someone else's paper. So yeah, that's really cool, Varun, actually, and very motivating for students and emerging researchers like us to keep going ahead.
Well, you see, management, as I found out, is a discipline that leads with the idea, leads with the theory, which is to say that there has been a body of knowledge, a body of work, a body of research that has happened, and we, as new researchers or as somebody who wants to make a new original contribution to this management space, this field of knowledge, we are not going to forget about all of that work that has already been done. In fact, we are going to build on that foundation.
Even if it meant carrying suitcases of research articles on a holiday on a 10-day cruise with your family and just sticking into the papers rather than the rare moments of rest, right?
That's right. So when you have something that, like you say, lights a fire on your head, you carry your research with you wherever you go. So for me, there was that incident that you recalled correctly, where there was an incident where I couldn't say no to the family because they had booked this cruise for me and for my whole family, and my dad was taking care of the payment, and so if I said no to that, it was like being disrespectful. The only middle ground that I could find was, instead of taking a suitcase full of clothes and shoes, I would take a suitcase full of books, and my suitcase would be heavier than everybody else's, but that's okay because I would carry that.
And you don't even care about your shoes and outfits anymore, right? Because you're occupied, you're mentally unavailable.
That's right. Available for different things, right? Available for different conversations, right? And it's always a struggle, when you really get carried away with your research. It's always a struggle to find people who you can really engage in conversation with. And that's why then when you seek out these conferences where people are talking about those things, those conferences become your home away from home.
Correct.
Right? So it's really, a great thing for master's students, for PhD students, to find these conferences and to go and seek out these conversations that are happening in your field. And then to aim to make a contribution to that that's what my research methods teacher always told me. She says, Varun, when I hear you talk about so many things, but what I want you to do is I want you to pick that one conversation, that one circle of people who you want to engage with, who are talking about that one thing, so that you can enter into that conversation and say something that actually makes a contribution.
Yeah, it's about gravitating towards your tribe, right? I mean, finding the right circle and sticking onto that circle. That's what helps you get better and pushes you to only better yourself towards the right direction and towards growth, I guess. So finding the right tribe is the actual thing that matters. And it's not just for us as students who cannot just move on from our paper until it's done. And even for me, it's like that. When I'm dealing with one paper, I completely soak into that paper and I cannot think about something else, even the other paper, because I am so invested in that particular moment and in that particular zone that I have to be completely there and get done with it. And then only I can shift to the other one. So I thought it was only for me, but it looks like it's for Varun as well and for all the students actually.
Yeah, and there are pros and cons of that I have found. So we can become functionally fixed in our research. So we can come to a stage where we put blinders on ourselves and we don't see things that are happening in the peripheries. And so that's the danger. So it's good to have moments where you zoom out and then you zoom back in. So this process of zooming out and zooming in keeps you confident that you are actually focusing on the right things in your research. So, although it is great for one paper to be focused on one point, one argument, one theoretical contribution, your research career is more than just one paper. And sometimes you're working on multiple papers at the same time. So it's a balance of zooming in and zooming out. We can't zoom in all the time. We have to have moments where we zoom out as well and look at the bigger picture. And so I think that's one of my strengths, is I have a mind that does that quite naturally. And I think most of us do, because when we're children, we look at everything, right? We look at the world with the eyes of a child, right? That's how the saying goes, right? We look at everything and we embrace everything. And so I've been lucky to keep some of that naivety alive in me. So I do look at the bigger picture. And when it comes to my research, I now have the ability, through the training that I received through my research methods teacher, Snezhina Mikalova at the University of Auckland. The training that she gave me was, when you are working on a paper or you're working on a PhD project, you've got to bring that attention in. And you've got to lock it down to your research question. You've got to lock it down to your contribution. And then once you have that locked in, do not allow yourself to be distracted by the bigger picture until you've finished that. And then once that's finished, yes, then you can go and look at
micromanagement, right? I mean, sticking to what you are supposed to be doing and not getting on with any distractions or any other element that might drive you away from the actual topic and the goal. Which brings me back to the kind of balance that you've been creating in your life every day. I mean, it's really inspiring for me to see as a witness. And I witness this throughout my journey here in this campus, actually. And I look at you and I'm like, wow, he is creating some good balance in his life, because he is doing yoga, he's doing research, he's teaching, he's lecturing, and what else? There's so much more that you've been doing in your life. And how do you create this balance, Varun? I'm very curious. I mean, what time do you wake up? What does a day in the life of Varun look like?
Well, thank you. It's it's really humbling because you have people that you look up to. And then when you think about the people who you look up to, who you're inspired by, you find yourself as doing very little compared to your mentors or your inspirations. So somebody who I've looked up to is Jiddu Krishnamurti. I've looked up to Jiddu for inspiration, for guidance, for a long time. And only through reading his books and only through listening to his talks on YouTube and elsewhere. And then, as I thought about the things that Jiddu was saying more and more, the philosophy of Patanjali Yoga Sutras was somehow introduced to me by my father in 2022, October, when I was at a stage in my PhD where the PhD had hit a wall and I was not progressing. I was not able to write up the thesis in the way that it had to be written. I had all my data, I had some of the analysis, but I wasn't able to tie the front end and the back end of the thesis into one coherent piece, which is the literature review and the problematization with the analysis and the findings. I wasn't able to make that marriage between the front end and the back end. And everything was, deemed rubbish. So when I confronted my father about this, my father said something that I did not expect, which was, Varun, you are living close to the Auckland Yoga Academy. Because at that time I was living away from my wife and kids in a building here in the city, which I happened to be managing that building. I was the building manager of this 144 apartment complex at that time. And my father said, you're literally 2 minutes walking distance from this building. Go and join the yoga academy and then see what happens. And I did. I just had to surrender at that moment because I was like, I don't know any better. I have no other ideas. I'm all out of ideas. And that's one of the things that Jiddu Krishnamurti talks about is like, whatever you try to do, effort, all the effort that you try to do doesn't really take away the conditioning that you've been, putting yourself through. So you might be putting more effort, but sometimes that effort that you're putting in is actually tying you into a tighter knot. So sometimes the idea is to surrender to something that is bigger than yourself. And so for me, when my father said, Varun, go to yoga, I said, okay. And I did. I went 4 times a week initially, did the 1 hour classes. This is asana. So we started with just asana practice without any yoga sutras or any philosophy. And once I started doing 4 days a week, asana practice, Ashtanga Vinyasa flow yoga, I started to see a shift in my mind. I started to see a shift in my body, in my physique, and the mobility in my joint, especially my right knee, started to heal. Because from 2017 to 2022, I had ignored my body, and I was sitting in odd postures, and I was hunched up in my shoulders, and my right knee had really, started to hurt in everyday, situations. So I started to see an improvement in that. But I also started to notice an improvement in my focus. Because in Ashtanga, you're always focusing on your breathing, and you're focusing on your gaze point where you're looking in each pose, and you're also focusing on your bandhas, which are, the locks in your body where you hold your posture. So in 4 months, from October to February, I made more progress in my PhD than I had done in the last couple of years. So in 2 months, I made more progress than I had in the last 2 years. And that's because I had so much more focus from doing the yoga, from doing the asana practice.
So you practice yoga every morning or every day, any time of the day, right? So what time does your day start generally?
So I am doing a practice of 5 Mysore practices a week right now. 3 of those are at the Shala and 2 of those are at home right now. And the practices at the Shala go from 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. So normally if I want to do my meditation and warm up, I'm at the Shala by 5:30 a.m. So I can start my practice at 6 a.m. If I really want more luxury in my meditation and my warm up, I'll be there by 5 a.m. or 5:15 a.m. So I can really relax into the warm up and the meditation. And that's also because I don't want to be late for my teaching, which starts at 8:30 a.m. here. So I have a very small window of time after the yoga to have a shower, get ready, and have a protein shake, and then come here. At home, it's a different story, because at home, my kids wake up at 6:30 a.m. So once my kids wake up, it's about getting them ready for school. So we have, between me and my wife, we have some days she drops them off and some days I drop them off. So if I'm at home, then I've really got to wake up and start my practice at 4 a.m. So I'll wake up at 3:30 a.m. and do my practice from 4 a.m. to 6 a.m. So I can have a shower and be ready at 6:30 a.m. to wake up the kids and do their breakfast.
So it's just very less amount of sleep and more amount of focus and practice if you got to keep going, right? Just enough.
We try to be in bed by 8. So I have an alarm every day for 7:30 p.m. which says, go to sleep at 7:30 p.m.
Oh, mine says at 10.
Yeah, and some days it's really bright in the summer, right? Out when you're trying to go to bed at 7:30.
Yeah, here in New Zealand, correct.
Thinking about your future? Here's your chance to make big connections. Join us on Thursday, October 23 from 3:30 p.m. to 6 p.m. on Level 1 AIC for the AIC 2025 Career Expo. It's your opportunity to meet industry partners and graduate employers in construction, IT, and business management. Learn, network, and take the next step toward your career goals.
You come from a very long line of teachers, right? But what actually motivates your styles of teaching, all the innovations that you try to bring into our teaching structure, from perusals, be it for AI avatars or notebook LLM, RISE, Mural, everything that you've been doing in class and all the exciting interactive activities that you do in the class, that was really inspiring and attractive for me, actually, because it's quite new for me and for I'm pretty sure for our students who come from other parts of the world, not from a first world country. I mean, this is the first world country we are living in and trying to achieve this education, right? So it's completely new and it's very motivating for people and learners like me. So what actually pushes you to integrate all of these techniques into your teaching methods?
Yeah, and that's a very good question. I had a mentor at the University of Auckland who was also my supervisor, Dan Tish, and I was working with him in teaching some courses, and one of those courses was climate change. And climate change became a capstone course for the entire business school during our time teaching together. And we were responsible for developing a module on climate change that could take students in large numbers through, 3 or 4 cohorts, so 300 sized cohorts, and 3 or 4 cohorts over 12 weeks. And we had to come up with a way to give them the essential skills that they needed to do consulting in the climate change arena, to negotiate on climate change issues. But we had to do it using innovative technologies, because if we relied on the old traditional manual tools that we have as teachers of reading written assessments produced by students and then grading those assessments as we have done traditionally, we wouldn't be able to achieve the bigger picture that we were required to achieve. So we used things like perusal in those settings, and we used things like Mural. So Dan Tish trained me on how to use perusal effectively and how to use Mural effectively. Mural, we used it to guide real-time collaboration in a large classroom setting of 300 students. So in a large classroom setting where 300 students are working together, we can have teams of 2 to 3 people working in one mural, and they can be interacting and working together.
How spiders and frogs and you name it. It is really fun in class, actually. And this just recalled the activity that we did for Okafor and Rivera and all the characters that you put us into. And it was really fun. And the learning was better. And it was more achieving for me, more than just reading through the text, and it was kind of interactive. So yeah, it makes sense. I mean, how you're trying to integrate all the practical application of knowledge to theory to application, and application to theory. So it was really fun, and I still remember how we enjoyed, being set up into groups and planning all this assignment together, even if it had nothing to do with the real, course outline. But it really had a huge impact on the way we learned and the way we acquired knowledge, right? So yeah, thank you, Varun, for introducing all of that.
No, it's very interesting because traditionally in education, we have a tendency to be compliant. So all of our course outlines and our assessments and our curriculum, they have to be structurally aligned, and we have to be compliant with either the government regulations or our own internal standards. A lot of what happens in the classroom, the experiences in the classroom, are not captured by any of this compliance documentation.
Correct.
So my experience tells me that if we focus on the experience of each individual in the classroom, which defies compliance, which defies any attempt to capture it and document it and process it for compliance. It is so rich, it is so vast that we cannot hope to put it in a box which fits in the course outline.
Correct. It's actually something out of the box, but it's very impactful and very applicable for being inside the box. I mean, for the learners who are really there to learn and who are really there to understand and acquire some new skills, it was really helpful. So we've also been talking a bit about AI in research, and we've always had this discussion and argument in class about AI, how it's going to shape the whole academia. Where do you think academia is headed with AI, Varun? What do you think it's going to look like in a few years?
So, as we were saying earlier, we have some choices to make as a global society. And if you listen to the historians, we're at this very critical turning point now where each individual can either choose to go down this path of being hijacked by the ghost in the machine, which is this black boxed technology that we have no idea how it operates. However, we rely on this technology for every aspect of our day-to-day life. So this is the danger of AI technology and relying on AI technology to solve all of our problems for us. However, on the other hand, we have this great tool now that we have developed as a global society that can help us to achieve so much more with our time. So as a teacher, I rely on AI tools to help me prepare these rich course materials that then help me to deliver rich experiential learning experiences in the classroom. And if I didn't have my fleet of AI agents working for me, I would not be able to achieve so much on my own. So, but I have to be very cautious, and I have to have the understanding of how my AI agents are working for me. If I surrender that back-end thinking over to the AI, then, I put myself and my teaching practice in danger of being hijacked by the machine, by the ghost in the machine. So I think AI is a double-edged sword. I think it has a wonderful promise, and I think we must utilize the potential of AI to make our working lives easier and more manageable so that we can take care of things that we are really interested in. But at the same time, we must be cautious not to give too much control in the workflow to AI, and we must retain some of that back-end logic and that back-end thinking. So how do we do that? That's the real question. Do we do that through having a library of prompt documents? Do we do that by having an archive of Python scripts? Everybody has their own way in which we are trying to now do this so that we can have some certainty as to what the AI is going to do when prompted. So I think that's the next frontier.
Yeah, and keeping the authenticity alive and not losing the sense of originality. That's what matters, because earlier the ideas were raw, they were original, they came from the space where they exactly were burned from. But now it's like you cannot trust where this idea is coming from, if it's original, if it's real, if it's actually coming from the source or not. And in the same time, we also have to be cautious enough to be able to judge and decide about the originality and the authenticity and the quality. So it's like a best friend for all of us. And owning a robot, each person, earlier we used to watch it on movies, everybody had a robot there, and the robot is trying to help and how it's trying to assist the humans and making life easier. But now it's like each individual can be the owner of this robot, this technology so far, and it's not even a luxury anymore. It's like everyday thing. But again, it's about trying to keep the control on ourselves and not letting the robot take control ourselves and our authenticity, right? So yeah, that's really thoughtful decision to make for all of us as users, especially.
Well, it's interesting when we talk about ownership of AI. In 1988, there was a book that came out which was called Manufacturing Consent. One of the authors was Noam Chomsky, and the other one was, I think, Herman. And they talked about ownership being one of the filters of mass media through which the institution of mass media basically becomes corrupt or does not deliver what is in the best interest of the public. So it goes towards this propaganda model because the owners have different interests to the interests of the public. So now we are seeing OpenAI coming up with advertising in ChatGPT. This idea that now when you ask ChatGPT a question, it will give you responses that are filtered not only through the ownership, which is OpenAI, but also through the advertisers that have paid OpenAI. And whether or not we are in ownership of our own AI agents or not. I don't think we are. I think that we have to be very careful, and I think those models, like the propaganda model from Manufacturing Consent in 1988, those ideas are very relevant today, but the meaning of those, the meaning of mass media is now different, and it has shifted towards even social media, right? We used to think in the beginning of social media that we were the owners of our own content that we were putting into YouTube. But now we've realized that actually the algorithms that are governing the dissemination of that content are owned by Google. And hence, we are actually not the owners anymore.
We're actually feeding the system and training the system, right, to function better. But anyway, we are surrendering ourselves, our identity, our secrets, our everything that we possess towards something that is not owned by us anymore. So it's very vulnerable sometimes and very sensitive in some matters. But as students, we're very lucky to have a teacher like you who actually helped us learn the correct way and ethical way of AI, and you've been training us with all of these methods that we can utilize to get a richer content for our research and other learning criteria for the whole academia. So we're very lucky. Thank you, Varun, for all of that. What is your one good message for all the students like me, like others?
At this time in history, all of us have a responsibility to maintain that rich inner life, that rich inner world that we have, and to protect that, rich inner space that we all have, because there is so much stimulation in our daily environment that calls out to us. And sometimes it's easy for us to forget that there is so much richness already inside us, that we don't need to be, lured or, tempted or distracted by all of the suggestions that are, constantly coming, the notifications that are constantly coming at us from all directions. So it's to recognize that we are already whole and complete, right? And to reside in this sense of being whole and complete. And then whatever we do, whatever you decide to do, is an overflowing of that sense of wholeness and that sense of being complete. Not as, seeking something, like you said in the beginning, the metaphor that you used, which was seek and you will find and you will know and you will understand. Well, what I'm saying is, if you just understand who you are, right, go the other way, right, then you will know everything there is to know that is meaningful, right? And you will find everything that there is to find. And then there will be no need to seek, right?
Correct.
You will not need to seek anything. And that's not to say I'm against ambition. I think ambition is a great thing. But I think that sometimes we can feel like we don't have what we want, and we want this and we want that. But I think for all the young people listening, you are enough, right? So just being yourself and respecting yourself and honoring yourself and taking care of yourself, I think is so important. So I hope that everyone listening takes that one thing away.
This is just so wholesome, Varun. I mean, I really felt it in my heart. I can just sense this aura, like I can feel this energy when you are speaking, when you're sharing your thoughts and mind. Thank you so much, Varun, for all of this, and for all that you do for all of us as students and as a mentor. Thank you so much for being here today, Varun.
Thank you, Sangya, and thank you everyone for listening.
And if you enjoyed today's Correro, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and spill the words with your friends. And let us know who do you want to see next in our episode of What's Up AIC. Thank you so much for watching. Ka kite ano. See you next time.